it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books that I have read so far in 2021. So I honestly have been in such a video slump lately. I don't know what it is. I mean, I just can't think of what I want to film. I feel like in a lot of ways 2021 has been a lot harder for me than even 2020 was. Like just being in Canada and specifically Ontario with watching everyone open up and everything and be able to get vaccinated so much more quickly than we were. It was just really difficult, and now I have moved to Quebec, but the adjustment has been really difficult for me. So I apologize for if my content has become repetitive or if I don't seem the most upbeat. I just honestly have been having a hard time adjusting to the move, being away from my family, trying to find my footing here where I don't speak the language. And I know a lot of people speak English, but not really where I am. So it has been very difficult to say the least. So I kind of have been going back to comfort things. And when I thought of what I wanted to film today, I thought of two things. One, I want to film a video about books that I really want to read soon because it's things to look forward to. I feel like I have been kind of down lately, and having things to look forward to is really going to help me. So I wanted to talk about some books that I'm excited about. And then the other thing is this video here. I haven't done this before. I do my favorites video at the end of the year during Bookmas, and then I do the mid-year freakout book tag, which will have gone up recently when you see this video. But after doing that, I was I actually have a lot of books that I've read so far this year that I really have loved. It's been a great reading year overall, so that's one thing that I've had going for me. So I had a hard time narrowing down to just 10 books. Now these aren't going to be in any particular order, unlike my end of the year video where I actually order them, but I think it's interesting to see what I've loved so far and if those will have the longevity going into the second half of the year. Because if the second half of the year is anything like this first half has been in terms of reading, I am going to have such a hard time narrowing down my list to something manageable. But that's a great problem to have. I'm not mad about it at all. So I did mention a couple of these books in the mid-year freakout book tag, but I have plenty more to talk about, so let's just get into it. The first book that I want to talk about is definitely one that you guys know probably by now. It was going to show up on this list because I absolutely adored it, and if I were ordering this list it would be at number 1, and that is We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. I've noticed that historical fictions tend to take my top spot in my favorite books of the year list a lot. I don't know why. I mean, I love the genre and I think they're just the most impactful reads for me, and this definitely was one. I'm just going to talk about it briefly because I talked about it quite a bit in the mid-year freakout book tag, but this is a story that is told from the perspective of 14 different Japanese teenagers. They're Japanese Americans who have been taken from their homes and put into these incarceration camps. So I think this is required reading for everyone, especially if you're American or Canadian, because those camps existed in America and in Canada. I didn't know until recently that they existed in Canada as well, and that is something that people need to know about. So it's just a terrible part of history that I think you need to be educated on, and this book does a great job of it. You get so many perspectives of this horrible experience and it will just completely rip out your heart, but it is also such a beautiful story. So I definitely think this is one that is for sure worth the read and needs to be way more popular than it is. Next is actually another historical fiction, and that is Luck of the Titanic by Stacey Lee. So Stacey Lee is an author who has quite a few diverse historical fictions, which is awesome because historical fiction is definitely a genre that needs to amp up the diversity. It's very much like white Western stories, but there are a lot coming out that aren't that, which is lovely. So this is definitely one of them. I read her, I forget what book it was, Under a Painted Sky. That was the first book that I've read by her last year, and now I've read 2 more of her books by now, and I think I have 1 more to go, but this one is probably my favorite. favorite. I do have a soft spot, I guess, for shipwrecks, which sounds so weird, but like I was obsessed with them as a child. So when I saw this was coming out and it was focusing on Titanic, and specifically it is based on the fact that there was recent evidence that came out that there were Chinese passengers on the Titanic. So there were 8 Chinese passengers and 6 of them survived. So you are following the Chinese passengers aboard the Titanic. The main character, she is an acrobat and she's trying to make it to America to be an acrobat. This story just wasn't what I expected, but in the best way. Valora was a fantastic character to follow. I fell in love with her. She was very headstrong and driven, and just a pleasure to read from her perspective. And you see how much she cares for family, both like her biological family, but also her found family. And it was just a lovely relationship to read about. And this really shows you what life was like on the Titanic in both of the different classes and how the experiences of those passengers differed as well. It was just a very multifaceted story that I had, I don't want to say fun reading, but it was very interesting and hooked me from the beginning, and I did enjoy it overall, even though like it literally was very heartbreaking. Obviously, you know, it's going to be heartbreaking, but like it really was. It was easy to forget you were aboard the Titanic in this book, so the ending still kind of took me by surprise. The next book is one that I don't think I've actually even mentioned other than wanting to read it because I read it right before moving, but that is The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I was super excited for this book because I loved beach read. It was one of my favorite books of last year, and this one sounds like it was right up my alley as well, and I'm so glad that it didn't disappoint me. So this follows a travel writer, and it is a friends to lovers story, second chance romance sort of thing. I feel like those kind of can be interchangeable, but I digress. So you have these 2 best friends who they haven't talked for like 2 years. They used to travel every summer together, and now they're going on a trip again and meeting up again, and the chemistry between these characters is beautiful. It's told between then and now, so you get the past trips that they've been on all those summers, and then kind of the falling out that they had, and now as they are coming back together. It's a lovely romance. Like, I love the fact that Emily Henry writes romances that are a little bit deeper, and there's nothing wrong with like romances that aren't deeper, but I love that hers also make me think and make me like really feel for the characters. She does a great job of writing characters, and their relationship just, oh my goodness, I totally loved this one and everything about it. It was fantastic, and I am so excited to see what she's going to come out with next, because if it is anything like her other 2 romance / chick lit books, it's going to be fantastic. Next up is Early Departures by Justin A. Reynolds. Justin A. Reynolds is an author that I also was introduced to last year when I read his first book, Opposite of Always, and he writes contemporaries with a twist, and this one is no exception. The twist in here is that the main character, his best friend, who they don't get along anymore, they've had a complete falling out in a fight, he ends up dying, and then he is able to be reanimated for a short period of time thanks to this new technology that has come out that allows for reanimation. So he's able to say his final goodbyes, hopefully reconcile with him. So this is a story that really will completely like crush you. It's going to take you out, basically. I have never felt so affected by a book that I've read, or at least like not in recent memory. The only one that I can think of is The Book Thief and The Nightingale, and the emotion of those, like, it just deals with grief very heavily and loss and the feelings that accompany that, and it's just so poignant. And I just like, I didn't expect it to be as affected by it as I was, but it felt so heavy. And like, I think maybe part of it is because I read this before moving, so I was like, I'm going to be leaving my family soon, and I was sad about that. So like, it was just a combination of things that this book just completely, I felt like it punched me in the face, but in the best way. It was so powerful and amazing, and I think it is a great book, one of the best books that I've read that deals with grief and loss. I think it does a fantastic job of that, but I also think you kind of need to be in the right mindset to read it, because it could really depress you. On a totally different note, next up is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I read, what is it, Get a Life, Chloe Brown? I always get the titles mixed up, but I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown last year, and I was kind of underwhelmed underwhelmed by it a little bit. I did like it, but I felt like it was a little bit overhyped. I was expecting to enjoy it a lot more. However, once I read this one, I totally understood what all the hype was about. I think this one just appealed to me a little bit more in terms of like the subject line. Like, this one is not enemies to lovers. Get a Life Chloe Brown is enemies to lovers, which isn't my favorite trope, and especially in that case, like, I just didn't really understand the hatred. It just kind of didn't do anything for me. So I'm so glad that I still decided to continue with the series because, oh my goodness, this was fantastic. So in this book, we have a bisexual main character and we have anxiety representation, which is amazing, but it features fake dating, friends with benefits. Like, I don't know what else I could ask for in a book, honestly. I loved the character of Dani. She was amazing. Like, I just wanted to know her. And I also loved her love interest. I can't think of his name because I'm terrible with that. Zeph. I loved him. Like, their relationship too, the chemistry totally hooked me. I loved the whole premise for it, and watching this relationship develop was, oh, it was just amazing. Her writing is fantastic, so much fun to read. She writes banter very well, and I loved it. I feel like this list, like, it's not final because there are some books that are kind of on the same level. It was literally so hard for me to narrow this down to 10, okay? So if there's a book that you expected to see on here that isn't, it probably is like in the back of my mind as like I could have done 15 books, but I decided not to. So that being said, this is one that kind of like was almost edged out, but not quite. But that book is Unbirthday by Liz Braswell. So this one has a special place in my heart because Alice in Wonderland, obviously. I was so nervous going into this book though, because I was like, what if I don't like it? Like, what if I end up hating it? But I didn't at all. I had so much fun with reading this one. I thought that it was a great twisted tale. So the Twisted Tale series is a series that Disney does where it just twists like a typical Disney fairy tale that you're familiar with. So in this case, Alice, like, Wonderland is in peril and Alice is running very, very late. So this did a good job of modernizing the story, but also staying true to the original story and the original characters. It still had that nonsense, the nonsensical nature, but there was also some impact to it. And Alice was more grown up and she was exactly who I would expect her to be as well. I found her so true to the character, and I found all the other characters to be so true to themselves that it just made me smile. I had like so much fun with this one. I felt like I was watching the movie, like I could picture the characters perfectly, which is exactly what I wanted from it. I wanted a new story, but also staying true to the source material, and I felt like it did that perfectly. So I do need to read the rest of the Twisted Tales books because I have them, and I keep talking about the dang readathon that I want to do, but then life keeps on getting in the way, so I will do it, but I felt like this was a great place to start with them. Next up is Invictus by Ryan Groudon. So Ryan Groudon is the author of Wolf by Wolf, which had my #2 book of the year spot last year. Did that sentence make sense? I don't really know, but I was really excited for Invictus because it seemed unlike anything that I had ever really read before, and that's exactly what it was. It's a story that deals with time travel, and I feel like it's kind of what I wanted Passenger by Alexandra Bracken to be. I didn't really mesh well with that book, but this was exactly what I wanted. So it travels through like space and time, and it follows a character who shouldn't really exist but does. He kind of was born outside of time, so he is, I don't know, an oxymoron or something. I can't think, like, there's a specific term that I'm looking for, but I can't think of it. It's not oxymoron. A conundrum, if you will, I guess. But this like has so many sci-fi elements to it, and I struggle a little bit with sci-fi, but this one I felt like it was really well done and I was able to understand things pretty easily. And I just loved all the traveling and the world that was built. It was a lot of fun. Very different than Wolf by Wolf, but still amazing. Like, I love the fact that she writes really unique and interesting stories, and I hope she's coming out with something else because I haven't really seen anything else, but I'm eager to read more. Next up is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. I loved this book. It was such a fantastic fantasy. Once again, a very different story, but it was so vibrant. The world was fantastically built. Like, I'm pretty sure this is a debut novel, and if it is, like, it's an incredible debut. It does not read like a debut at all. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, but Oh my goodness, it just transported me to the world, and I loved reading about the characters as well. It's very hard for me to explain. I always try to explain it and I feel like I butcher it, but basically the main character, she has this mother figure that's the lady, but she's never like allowed to really see her or touch her or anything. She can't talk to her, none of that. So she's just desperate for human connection, and she has the opportunity because the emperor needs like these people who, like, there's 8 of them and they attach their rays, and the book does so much better of a job of explaining this than I do. But basically all you need to know is it's a really unique magic system, and the lady is trying to use that to kill this prince. It's not actually the emperor, it's the prince. So trying to use that to kill the prince, but she is just wanting a connection. Like, it's a lot happening. I'm sorry, I feel like I butchered it. Just read the book, just pick it up, because it is fantastic, like so different, and I would love to see this adapted, honestly. Next up is a book that I just love so much, and that is Dial A For Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. When I started this, literally, I don't even think I was a chapter in, and I knew I was going to love it. I knew it was going to be on my favorites list for the year. I feel like this one is going to have the longevity to make it to my final list, but it is just so fun. It's so different. Like, I talked about this in the mid-year book freakout tag, so it's not the first time I've talked about it, but I will not shut up about it because it's fantastic. I alternated between the audiobook and physically reading it, and either way, it was a fantastic experience. Like, the narrator of the audiobook did such a great job. I just highly recommend this book. It features 4 Asian aunties, and the main character, she is in like a second chance romance sort of thing, and the 4 Asian aunties are trying to help her hide a dead body, all against the backdrop of this really big wedding. So there's a lot happening, but just trust me, you will not regret reading this. And the last book that I wanted to talk about today is Tokyo Ever After by Emiko Jean. This is a book that I was super excited for once I heard of it, and it didn't disappoint me, which is awesome. I love when that happens. So this is the Princess Diaries, but the main character, she finds out that her father, who she's never met, is actually the Crown Prince of Japan. So she ends up going to Japan and taking up the role as princess, and it's just like the Princess Diaries meets Crazy Rich Asians. It's amazing, like so fun, so adorable. The romance is amazing. There's not like a ton of conflict to it, but that was one of my favorite things about it because it was just a really easy and quick read. So highly recommend this one. I think I heard that there was going to be a sequel. I don't know if I'm just making that up or confusing it with another book, but fingers crossed, because I would love that. Okay, so those are all of my top 10 books that I have read so far in 2021. I feel like this list gives you a pretty good preview into my final list of the year, but I also can like foresee some competition there because already it was so hard to narrow down. So it's gonna be interesting comparing the 2 videos, but please do let me know what your favorite book is that you have read so far this year. I think I asked you to let me know that on the mid-year freakout book tag, but still, let me know again. But don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week, and I will see you guys in a new video very soon. Bye!